everybody, it's Christy back with another video, and today we are going to paint some watercolor landscapes. So I am going to make 2 watercolor landscape cards that you really could use for any occasion, a thinking of you or a sympathy card or anything of that nature. I was asked on one of my lives a few months ago to do some simple landscapes, and so I figured I would show you kind of how I might go about approaching that process. So we're going to do that today. Just a quick reminder before we start that I am an art hobbyist and I am just here for fun. So if you would do something differently, or if you don't want my advice, that's totally fine. But I know that a lot of people find the process of starting watercolor kind of scary. So I just want to show you some really easy techniques that you can do to make some really beautiful starting landscapes. So we're going to go ahead and get to it. We're going to do a nice little paint and chat today. So for my materials, just because that's normally something I get asked, today what I have is a Fabriano Artistico watercolor block that is 7 by 10. So these pictures will fit nicely on 5 by 7 cards, which is my thinking. And then brush wise, I grabbed the following brushes. I have a Sarah Burns Studio 1/2 inch flat wash brush. I really like these for flat washes and for details. They have a really nice crisp edge, and I've been using them a lot for gouache. So I grabbed that. And then I've got 3 round brushes. You really don't need 3. You really could do this whole project with around 6 and one. I would say you would want to have one larger brush just because we're going to do some wet on wet, but you don't need a bunch of brushes. I just grabbed a bunch because I always like to have options. I also have, so this round 6 is a Mimik, Creative Mark Mimik brush. I really like these. They hold a lot of water and they really mimic the like a squirrel hair brush without being squirrel hair. We have an 8 round Princeton Neptune brush and a 3 round Princeton Velvet Touch brush. This 3 is a little stiffer since it's for details. That's kind of what I wanted. The 8 is a little more juicy. So if I want something where I'm going to kind of let a little bit more water out, then I will have that option as well. I've got my palette here from Arts to Embers that's filled with Daniel Smith watercolors. I wanted to use Daniel Smith because it's a pretty easy, accessible brand here in the US, but use whatever paints you have and match the colors as well as you can. And I have Dr. Paige Martin's Bleed Proof White. I am going to do a technique on the one painting where we do need some kind of opaque white medium. It could be this, it could be gouache. A little tube of white gouache would do just fine. And then I've got 2 water cups up here. Shout out to Sylvan Clayworks. Most of my ceramic stuff that you see on the channel comes from her. Sarah over there is just incredible. She did 365 vessels in 2023, and that project was absolutely incredible. So just trying to shout out some of my favorites today before we get started. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and start on the 2 different landscapes. One landscape is going to just be a scene with a tree and a few birds, and the other landscape is going to be a night sky with some shadows for trees and things like that. So I'm going to start on the top, and I am going to wet the entire background of this top piece. So whenever you wet something, you want it to be wet but not sopping wet. You want it to be glossy, but you don't want to be able to see the water running. So I'm going to show you in a minute kind of what that looks like, but I'm just going to wet the whole surface down. And then I'm going to use my towel to pull a little bit of water off because there are a couple spots here, and I'm making it a little bit wetter than I normally would because I'm going to try to show it to you. That's kind of what you want, maybe a little bit less water than that when you start, because you'd rather have a little more control than less if it's not something that you're used to. All right, so I'm going to grab my ultramarine blue, which is right here. It's a favorite color of mine, especially when it comes to sky stuff. It has a really pretty granular quality, especially the Daniel Smith one. And I'm just going to kind of drop it in here. I have my flat brush right now, but I'm probably going to move to a round brush here in just a second. But there's really no rhyme or reason when I start to how I kind of drop in for the sky. I just want to get some blue in there, and I am going to switch to my round 8 brush, which is going to hold a lot of water, but it's going to allow me to get some fluffier textures on the edges here. I am going to go a little bit deeper towards the top, but you could just paint the sky blue. If this seems a little bit too much for you as a beginner, you could just paint the sky blue, but I'm really not having any rhyme or reason to it, and it only is going to get easier once you kind of start the process of learning how to do it. So I'm just tapping in some color. It's kind of giving the illusion of clouds. And then at the bottom, I'm going to add a little bit more water and kind of just let it flow out. Anywhere where I see really harsh lines, I'm kind of trying to spread that out. And then some of these spots where we have a lot of blue, I'm going to deepen some more blue in there. Now that I've kind of got like general fluffiness established, just tapping like this. And I might clean some of this up in a minute. And then where I have white, and I do want to keep the pure white of the paper, I'm going to tap some clean water in there. And again, I'm just going to kind of let that do its thing. I'm not going to get too terribly excited or worried about it. And then at the bottom here, I am just going to kind of blend it out a little bit. So we've got the illusion of like a light kind of thing going on. I might even add just a little more blue down in here so that it looks like it's blended out a little more. And yeah, that's it. That's all I'm going to do up there. I'm going to kind of let it dry and do its thing. If I notice it's doing something I don't like, I'll just push it with my brush. And then at the very bottom of this painting, I am going to grab some, let's see, what color green do we want at the bottom here? We'll start with sap green. There's that sap green. And then maybe I will add just a touch of something bluer to it. So here's some Prussian blue. Yeah, I just want something a little bit darker because it's going to be the foreground. And I'm just going to put in very loosely, wet on wet, a little bit of grass down here. That's it. And I'm going to let it bleed. Matter of fact, I'm going to go in with clean water, just a very dry brush of clean water. And I'm just going to touch it here so that it's going to kind of gently bleed into the sky. We'll add more to that later, but for now, that's all I'm going to do. Okay, and then up here, see, I'm getting some bursts I'm not crazy about, so I'm just going to kind of fluff it. There, that's good. All right, so we're going to let that one dry for a little bit, and while that one is drying, we'll go ahead and do the second background. So I'm going to start again with a dry brush, and I'm going to wet it down, this flat wash, and I'm going to wet the whole thing down again. I'm going to be very careful not to drop any water on the piece that's above this. Probably should have done them in the opposite order, but that's okay. We're going to be working on them both simultaneously, so just something you should pay attention to. All right, so that's good. I don't really need the bottom of this to be super, super wet. Good. Okay. So now I'm going to take that puddle of ultramarine that I have there, and I am going to add Payne's Gray to it. This is what color here? Oh, that's an indigo, so that's okay too. I can add some of that. I want a little bit of a darker color here, but I want it to have an undertone of blue. So that's good. And then, yeah, I'm going to go in with some indigo too. You just basically want to make a puddle that's kind of a dark blue gray. And we are going to water that down quite a bit. So we're going to start with it pretty dark up here in the sky. And then I'm going to kind of just pull it down. I'm going to use some water because we can always make it darker, but it's hard to make it lighter. And I'm just going to add it to most of the sky. This one is going to be the easier of the two paintings. There's less to it. I'm just kind of going in with what's going to look like a pretty flat process like that. So we're just doing that the whole way down. You can add more color to the top if you feel like it needs it. I feel like this may need a little more. Okay, right up in here. Because you want that to be pretty dark, but then towards the bottom, you're going to want it to kind of fade out because we're going to put trees down there and we want the values to be different. So that's pretty good. Now, the cool fun part of this one is the moon. So what we are going to do here is take our bleed proof white now, and we are going to grab, I think I'm going to grab my round 3 for this. And I am going to go into my bleed proof white, and I'm going to get a bunch of it on my round 3. And then I'm going to pick my spot where I'm going to have my moon. It's going to be here, and I am going to tap it in, trying to make it in a circle, and I'm going to let magic do its work. So I'm not going to fool with that too much. Just going to tap it in. As it dries, we can add more. But again, it's going to be hard to recreate. So I'm just going to kind of go a little bit heavier on this because I want it to be a little bit bigger. There. That's kind of what I want. I want that kind of faded effect on the edges where it's going to be looking like the moon is glowing from the background, kind of like the eclipse. I kind of got the idea from that. Now, this is not completely dry yet, but it's dry enough that I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to throw another piece of watercolor paper over it. Let me close this paper. There we go. So I'm not using it up. And what I'm going to do here, hold on, because I don't want to ruin this paper. There we go. I'm going to just spatter in some little stars with the brush here. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do this. The way that I like to do it is I like to get some water in the lid here to make this a little bit more runny with enough pigment so that it's going to have some juice. And then I just keep adding water to it until it's kind of like a, I almost want to say milky consistency, but maybe even a little thinner than that. And then I'm just going to take another brush handle and I'm just going to do a little bit of tapping. Now this is wet on wet, so because this is still wet, it's going to kind of spread out, and that's kind of the effect I want here. Oh, that we got some big ones over there. So what we might do now is we might drag those ones back a little bit with what we like to call a dryer brush. So we might just do that in order to have it not be so. Let me dry that brush off. There was color on that brush, as you can probably see. Yes, I'm just going to tap it out a little bit so it's not quite so severe. Maybe try to put a little bit of pigment in there. But if you got a big one like that, it's not a big deal. There. So that is going to dry, and once it dries, we'll see if we need to do something different there or not. But yeah, so that is basically all we're going to do with that piece right now. And then there is the top piece, and we are going to let both of these dry completely before we do anything else. So I will be back in a second, but in reality, I'm going to let them hand dry. So one other thing I was going to add is while we're still drying, I'm just going in with a wet brush, and I am kind of cleaning up my moon a little bit so that it's going to be a little bit more round, but still kind of look like it's faded on the edges. So we're getting that neat effect, and you can actually go in with a little bit of a semi-wet brush. And if you want it to fade out, just kind of touch the very edge of it, and it will do that kind of a fading effect like that. Okay. But you can also just let it be a round moon. You can put it on there after the fact. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and let this dry and then we will come back. All right, so our top painting is completely dry. So the next thing we're going to do here is actually wet it down again because I want to put a big tree on this side of the page and I want to start with kind of a little bit of a wet on wet technique. We're not going to quite be as crazy as we were last time. I am just going to go in and just go over this once with paper. If you have less quality watercolor paper, you may not be able to do this way, and you may want to just plan and do this on the first layer originally. So I'm just going to go ahead and go over it again. Nothing should move at this point if you're using artist grade stuff. And again, if you're not, then you can do this within the first layer. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this green puddle that I made and I'm going to add some lemon yellow to it because I want to create a really light springy green to go underneath my tree. You want to work kind of light to dark. So I am going to keep adding yellow. Shout out to my yellow for always seemingly having green in it. All right, that's pretty good. It's a pretty light yellow. And you are going to then just kind of go in and very lightly with a brush, kind of tap in the general shape of where you want your tree to be. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you definitely want to think about where you want the tree, what the shape you want the tree to be. Mine's just going to be kind of like a ball. And I'm just going to kind of go in and tap in some of this really nice light yellow color where I'm wanting that tree to be. Okay. And like I said, you definitely could have done this when you were already into the sky, but this way for me, it doesn't muddy the sky. And we're going to cover a lot of this. So it's totally okay that we painted sky underneath it because it will help us with some of the natural shadows and spots where we can go ahead and put natural shadows. So that's it. I just wanted it to look kind of like that. And then we will go ahead and let it dry. If you want to, you could go back in and do another round on the grass here. So I could just go in and over here, I'm going to build that color again that I did for the grass. And this is actually a little darker version of it, so that'll be good. Because I'll just go ahead and give another layer. And that's pretty wet down there, so I'm not going to add too much more pigment. I will just go ahead and kind of flush it out. We're just trying to create the illusion that there's ground here. Maybe a little bit higher now, since we kind of see where the sky is ending there. And if you don't like that the sky kind of disappears there, we can always go back in and do just a little tapping at the bottom if you wanted it to be a little bit further down. And this is the thing you'll learn about me when I do things like this. I kind of start with a plan, and I did already paint these once, but you know, each time you do something like this, you learn something, you change something. It's never an exact science, and I'm just painting this from my head. I'm not really painting something from memory. So, okay, that's looking pretty good. I'm going to let that one dry. This one is getting drier, and we definitely have a weird spot here, but we're going to fix it when we do the ground, the foreground. So don't worry about that. It will get fixed. So now that our bottom piece is nice and dry, we're going to go ahead and we are going to paint a mountain and then the foreground. So I'm going to start with this puddle that I have right here already. And I'm going to add the same colors to it. This one's basically going to use all of the same couple of colors. So we are going to start with our Prussian blue, or is it, let me see. That might be Prussian blue. That's probably Prussian blue. I'm kind of old school when it comes to using that. And I'm going to add some Payne's Gray to it, a little bit more than I did for the sky, because I do want there to be a darker gray going on here. That's like a nice inky blue. And then I am going to just paint in a mountain, and I'm going to just use the tip of the brush to do it. And I'm just going to kind of make a line and then maybe go up from here and make another line and then maybe come down a little bit and go up. Nothing crazy, but immediately I'm going to use my wash brush or one of my round brushes, and I'm going to add a lot of water right underneath it. So the goal here is to kind of make what looks like depth by just adding a lot of water to the line you already made. And I'm going to drag it all the way down on the page. And then I'm going to see, do I think that line is too harsh? Because at first it looked really harsh, but now, if you notice, because I used quite a bit of water, it's actually looking really, really pretty like that. So now we kind of have this thing going on here. Now, if you wanted to, you could tap in some little trees or some little bushes at this point. So like, I'll do that in a couple spots with the same color. Maybe just like right here, I'm just going to add like the illusion. Maybe there's some bushes over here and some trees. And it's going to add a little bit of color underneath, but that's okay because it kind of mimics a shadow, right? Of what you're adding right there. So you don't have to do that, but you can if you want to. I'll just do it in a couple little places. I'm really just like drawing shapes of things. I'm not actually drawing anything in particular. It just kind of looks like there's a little bit of something on the mountain. And that's it. That's all I'm going to do there. I could do more, but I don't want to go crazy. This is supposed to be kind of a beginner idea, right? So that's what I'm going to do there. On the moon itself, I am going to go in now with the bleed proof white again, and I'm going to add some to the middle because I do want it to have a little bit of a deeper effect here. So I am going to go through and just kind of try to paint a little circle around. And I may end up going another layer on this with some gray, but I don't think I'm gonna. I think I'm gonna make it very white. Yeah, so that's good right there, and I'm not gonna do a whole lot to it. It will dry and inevitably maybe be a little bit less opaque than it currently looks, so we'll see how it goes after that layer. And yeah, so now up here, all right, we're pretty dry on the green. So now what we can do is we can start to tap in darker color from here. So I'm going to take this puddle of green that I made, and I'm kind of going to separate it by adding some of that Prussian blue and making a mid-toned green. So something that's closer to the sap green that I made earlier with just a little bit of blue in it because I don't know, that sap green is a little bit too sappy for me. So now I'm going to go over the tree and I'm just going to add some more depth with whatever direction I kind of want to go. Looking for shadows. I'm not, again, making it super complicated. I'm just going to add some extra color to the tree so that it's definitely got more than just one color of green because no tree has exactly one color of green. And I'm going to try to leave some white space as I go. Now that's too dark, so wash off my brush and go in and get some yellow. It already has my green in it. There we go, a little more sap. Okay, and then I'm just going to really water that down a little bit so it's not quite so bright. I'm just going to go in and I'm going to tap. Okay. Just make sure you don't cover the whole layer that's underneath. And if you're worried that you're getting too close to that, then you can go back in. I'm going to use a smaller brush here and grab some of that other green color and just kind of make sure you're tapping it into. And yeah, I'm not really any expert on this. I'm just having a good time kind of drawing the tree out, seeing what happens when I touch it with the brush. Because really this tree is backlit, so that's why we want the lighting underneath it, because it's not necessarily that the sun is coming from a direction. We're just going to backlight this tree. All right, so we're going to let that dry before we do a final layer of darkness on the tree. And then we could put in another layer on the foreground. So I do think we should do that now that this is dry. So let's go ahead and grab this darker color that we made here. And I'm going to even add a little brush into it and some more sap green. I really like that color of green. And we're just going to go ahead and we can add like a line at the foreground that kind of mimics the ground. Like that. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. And then if you wanted to, you could put in some little grass tufts in places because we are going to put a tree trunk in here. So we could just do some little like sprigs like that, just kind of indicating that there's some stuff in the foreground here. But really the tree is going to be the main focal point of this piece. Let's see if we're dry enough down here. Nope. So we're going to let everything dry completely before we go on to the next layer. All right, so on the bottom piece here, we actually have enough and we are dry enough that we can go ahead and go in to do the absolute foreground. So again, going to add some more Payne's Gray to this puddle of blue that I have here, kind of getting it like a dark inky color. And then what we are going to do with that color is we are going to draw a little foreground here. Doesn't have to be anything spectacular. Don't have to think too hard about it. You just want to get a nice dark contrasting hill in here because this is where we're going to put the big trees that are going to go over top. And you do want it to go all the way to the floor here like that. Okay. And then what I'm going to do from here is I'm just going to put in some trees. So we are going to start with a big tree here just to kind of try to cover up our little bit of a mistake. And again, it's not a big deal because that could just be an anomaly in the sky, right? We are learning and painting and it doesn't have to be perfect. So right now I'm just taking my Prussian blue and my Payne's Gray and I am mixing them together to get a very dark color. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw up my first tree. So I really like evergreens. So I'm going to put a big evergreen tree in. This is going to be my big focal tree. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw some little tines like that and a few more little tines. For the best tutorials on evergreen trees, I would recommend watching Colby Bloom and Emma Lefebvre. That's kind of where my style of tree came from. So I'm just kind of putting some little things along the tree just so that I have some markers. It doesn't have to be perfect and they don't have to match like that. And then now I'm just going to kind of go in and I'm going to fill in the tree, but not all symmetrically, just at different junctures in different ways. But I'm kind of giving myself an idea of how full I want the tree to be at the base so that I make it look proportional, right? So that's kind of the idea here. And I'm going to fill stuff out around it so it's not going to be so by itself when we're all said and done. But you want to point the first few sets of branches up, and then from there you just kind of want to come down and point the branches down like that. And notice that that line that I made was simply to keep the tree straight, but I am mostly covering a lot of the trunk. It's not going to get a lot of play, and that's a personal choice. You don't have to do that. You could leave something with a lot of trunk showing if you wanted to. Okay, so we'll make a few evergreen trees. I'm going to put that one there, and I'm going to put maybe another one over here. This one will be a little smaller. I'm going to make this one like a little bit less perfect and symmetrical. And this is one of those things that, I mean, I know how frustrating it is when you're new to hear like, oh, you just have to keep at it. But you do. If I, at some point, I'll do a big showing of my different sketchbooks and you can see how far I've come with doing this naturally. It's just a process of doing it a bunch of times. The more you do it, the easier it's going to get. But there's really no right or wrong way to kind of tap in a little evergreen tree like that. So that one's definitely fluffier than the last one I did, and that's okay. Gonna make myself some more of my mixture here of Prussian blue and Payne's gray. You can see how much I love Payne's gray because it's always needing replaced on my palette. Okay, good. So we get that nice inky blue. So now we could go in and we could just do like another kind of scraggly tree next to it. So we could do a trunk like that that's kind of going to taper off. And I'm going to fill that out a little bit more. And then we'll just, I don't know, like a dead tree, right? Something that looks like this and kind of goes whichever way you want. You don't even want to make it perfect. You kind of just want to draw it in. And if you're not comfortable with doing a tree that looks like this, you could do more evergreens. I know when I first started, trees like this gave me a lot of trouble, but just drawing something in that looks like that, I don't know where it's going to end up. I just kind of keep it going once I get it started. And I kind of hold the brush a little differently because I don't want to have as much control here. I want to kind of let the branches kind of dictate where they feel they want to go. Right, so then let's do a few more this way. That. And then maybe, and you should have more like towards the base inside of the tree, and then it should kind of taper off as you go. Okay. Yeah, I like how that looks. And then we could kind of do another tree like that if you want, or we could do another evergreen. So looking at this, maybe I'll do another kind of similar tree to this on this side. Doesn't have to be perfect. Doesn't even have to be near as intricate as that last one if you don't want it to be. But I'm just kind of making lines and having fun. You want the middle of the tree to be thicker, and then it can kind of just do its thing from there. And like sometimes when I look at what I'm doing, I'm like, oh, that's bad. But then when I look at it all together, I'm like, it's actually good. It's okay. It doesn't have to be some sort of perfect experiment. Notice I'm covering up some of what I did earlier, but that's okay because it still adds some depth to the painting. So yeah, up here, I just want to do a little more scraggle, like on the edge. I like that a lot. And then maybe I'll do some shorter evergreens. So some that kind of look like they're maybe bushes or like tinier trees. So we'll do one here. It's like a tiny tree. Oops. See, now I don't want to be below that line because it'll look displeasing to me. So I'm just going to go a little bit deeper. And yeah, I'm just almost like a little stunted guy. It's going to go right here. And he's certainly less perfect, but he's perfect for me. Yeah, and then I am going to go in on the bottom and just make sure I've got a nice thick layer that matches that forefront value. And that's it. That's all I'm going to do on that one. That one's done. So hopefully you like that idea. And now we're going to go back up and we are going to finish up the tree up here. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I am going to take this pile of medium green that I made, and I am going to make this, or I'm sorry, the darker green. And I am going to, again, do a little Prussian blue in with my sap green to make this darker color. And now we're going to go in, we're just going to tap that color in as well. And again, no rhyme or reason here, just trying to get some depth on the tree. So this would be the most close to you part of the tree. Definitely stuff that's lower will be a little bit darker, more of it than the lighter stuff, but the tree is backlit. And yeah, we're just gonna tap. It's not gonna be perfect at all. Just kind of trying to create the illusion there of some different colors. Now, this looks a little bit unblended, so I'm gonna take some water and I'm just gonna tap on the edges here a little bit so that it kind of starts to look like it's blending into the background and maybe blending the background a little. Does everyone see? It's like I'm teaching. Hopefully you can see on the video kind of what that's doing. Just giving a little bit less definition because it's kind of meant to be one thing. It's kind of pretty. Yeah, like that. We might go in and do a little more definition on a last layer. I'm going to let it dry and see. Trees for me are always kind of that kind of a process where you're just letting it do its thing. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to put the trunk in. So we're going to do a burnt umber trunk, I think. Let's see here. Yeah, we might mix a little, is this black or that's Van Dyke brown. Good. All right, so I'm just going to mix like a little bit of a darker trunk here. If you have burnt umber and you want to darken it, you can always mix it with like a Prussian blue. We'll do a really nice job of that. We're just going to put a very thin trunk in here. Let me see. Okay. A little thicker. Okay. And then I'm going to put some little tiny branches coming off of here. It's going to make it look a lot more natural, believe it or not. Okay. And then if you wanted to, you can pull some branches up. I didn't color the whole tree trunk. I kind of let it be a little bit there. And then we can put some branches up in here if you want to. I don't think you need to do too much of this as a beginner. But if you wanted to just give the illusion that there is things coming out of the trees in different spots like that, it can kind of be a cute little way. Down here, we could add some branches kind of peeking out like that. But yeah, I'm not going to go too crazy with that. I will maybe lighten it a little bit, but it looks pretty good that way. I'm not going to go too crazy. So let's let that dry and see if there's anything else we want to do when we come back. In the meantime, I am going to maybe add a few more little pieces of grass around the tree. Don't have to do this by any stretch, but like thinking like at a park where, they don't quite get right around the trees all of the time. And yeah, I'm going to let that dry and see how it looks. All right, so I'm actually really happy with the darks on the tree. I would like to lighten some of the lights if I can. So I'm going to just really go into that yellow and take that puddle I have and try to go back to that yellow color that we have here. And I even want it lighter than that. So again and lighten it up. There we go. So now, because yellow is a little bit of an opaque color, I probably can just go in on the edges, and some of it's a little bit still wet, and it's okay. And just lighten up towards the top of the tree some of these spots here. Some of them that look good I'm not going to touch, but I'm just going to kind of add maybe a little bit of light color even on top a little bit of the other, just to kind of get a little bit more contrast up there. I got a little bit excited with the dark colors, and I lost a little bit of that lighter that I wanted. So that's looking better. It's not going to be as dramatic if I go on top, but it'll still work. And I just wanted to show you guys this technique in case you get to the end and you're like, oh man, I went too hard with the darks and now all those pretty lights I had are gone. You can always just go back in like that and lighten it up a little bit. You could even use a little bit of gouache, of the white gouache, to kind of be mixed into it if you're feeling like your watercolor isn't showing up. All right, last but certainly not least, we're going to paint a few little birds over here. And I already have this very dark blue color. So I don't like to use black in my pieces. So I'm going to take that dark blue color and mix it with a little bit of the brown, which will make a more natural looking neutral. And that brown, and I could have used the ultramarine, but brown and blue are already in the piece. So all I'm going to do over here is I'm just going to take a very small brush and I'm going to draw a couple little birds. So like this. And then one that's maybe more up like that. I can also draw one that's wings are kind of going like that. And then what I like to do on my birds to make them look a little more realistic is just tap in like the hint of a body. It's not really a body, but it just gives you the idea that like, oh, hey, that's a bird, right? So something like that. You could put a few smaller ones in that don't have bodies if you want, that maybe are like further out. Like that, so that it kind of looks like those birds are closer and those ones are further away. I kind of like that effect. It looks nice, but don't overdo it. If I start drawing birds, I tend to keep going and overdoing it. So I am definitely going to kind of stop it there. So I'm going to let these dry, and then we'll pull the tape off and put them on card backs. All right, so these are our two landscapes. I think they turned out so cute. So we have our tree up here with our really cute little birds and our fluffy sky. And then we have our nighttime landscape here. Now you could go back before you do the foreground layer and you could actually spatter in bright white stars if you wanted to. But I kind of like the illusion of the wet on wet ones because is it snow? Is it stars? You know, it's hard to tell. And I kind of like that. I think it's neat that it looks like that. But that's completely up to you. All right, everybody loves a good tape reveal. I just have to remember who's taped on top. I think it's these layers here at the bottom. And I will see about doing a tape reveal here for you with these different layers. So this is the tape that came in the Sarah Burns and Craftamo boxes. And I really like it for this size because it gives me a nice wide border. So I'm going to take these off. I'm going to sign my pieces because even though these are going on cards, I think it's important for you to value your own work. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's see. Now we want to do the top. Looks like on the bottom I can get that tape easier. Hold on, I'm just gonna. Okay, so now we have all the pieces. I can easily do nice tape pulls for you. Look at those nice borders. Ta-da! All right, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to sign each piece. I like to sign my artwork with the following pen, if I can find it. Here it is. I usually like to use my Tombow Food Noscape pens. Ideally, I use a hard tip one. This one is a soft tip, so I'll be kind of gentle with my writing, but I'm going to do it right under here. And then I'm going to put the year on it. That's what I like to do. Do the same thing here. I know other people will put it with a white pen right on the artwork. So you do you. And then I'll take this off the block and I'll cut it down and I'll show you how I'm going to put it on card bases next. All right, so here I have two 5x7 card bases and my pieces are all nice and cut out. And you would just glue them on. You could just glue them on just like that. And you would have your card ready to go. I wouldn't put sentiments on the outsides of these. I think they stand for themselves as nice pieces of artwork. I would write on the inside, and then you've given somebody the gift of thought and the gift of art. So I think that's really cool. I'm actually not going to affix these two bases because I'm not sure if I am going to use them for cards or if I am going to put them in frames. I really like how both of these pieces turned out. So that is just a super simple card idea for a time of year when there's not a ton of holidays going on that you would use a card for. And so I just thought it would be really nice to have some simple landscape ideas. It was asked for in a live. So hopefully you guys got something out of this. I am not generally a tutorial maker on YouTube, but I have been doing these ones for easy cards. Let me know if you like these kinds of videos and you want more of them, or how I can improve them, or what you might have done differently on either of these pieces. I would love to know all of that in the comments below. And that's going to be it for me today. I hope that this inspires you to paint a landscape or mail somebody that you love a card today. And we will see you in the next one. Bye for now.